Hey, Motorman here. If you just wandered onto this channel by some strange twist of fate, you don't know who I am. I'm a motor officer instructor. I'm the maker of the Ride Like a Pro video. Yes, the biggest selling motorcycle instructional video in the world, and I wrote the book on these techniques. And today, for my tip of the week, we're going to talk about the most common motorcycle crash that involves just the rider, and it's called failure to negotiate a curve. It happens to so many people, and we're going to talk about whether or not age has anything to do with it. So stay tuned. Okay, if you've watched any of my 1,200 or so videos I've got on YouTube, or even better, my Ride Like a Pro video, or Surviving the Mean Streets video, you know that I stress 3 techniques. And I always say the most important of the 3 techniques is the proper use of your head and eyes. Wherever you turn your head and eyes, that's where the motorcycle will go. At low speeds, we want to master the friction zone, and also the proper use of the rear brake. But the most important technique is the proper use of your head and eyes, because you're going to use this at all speeds, and especially you better be able to use it at high speeds. Now, the most common motorcycle crash that involves just the rider is called failure to negotiate a curve. Rider gets into the turn, may think he's going too fast, straightens up the bike and runs right off the curve, and that happens because the rider doesn't know where to look, how to use his head and eyes. For instance, here I turn my head and eyes and I try to look through the curve. I position myself in a spot that will give me the best view around the curve. Once again, I look around through the curve. And we're going to do that again. So being this is the most common motorcycle crash that involves just the rider, does it have anything to do with age? Well, I'm going to show you a video where we had a rider that was 75 years old, had virtually no skills at all, and another rider who was probably 45 years old, and again had no skills at all. And we'll show you what happens to them when they try to make just a couple of turns at speed. And when I say speed, at about 10 or 12 miles an hour. And this also will depict why low speed handling is so important, because you practice in a parking lot, not because you're going to be riding out in a parking lot all the time, but we practice for the road. I guarantee you, if you're going to get into a crash or drop your motorcycle, it's much better to do so at 10 miles an hour than it is at 50 miles an hour. That's why we practice at low speeds. Even in motor officer training, when I went through my motor officer instructor class, first we had to master the low speeds. They would not take you up at the high speed part of the course if you flunked the low speed, because that meant you didn't know how to use your head and eyes properly, along with the friction zone and a little pressure on the rear brake. But so many people ride off a curve, and I know why it happens, because I see it in my class all the time, except they're not riding off the curve, they're just riding out of an exercise. But their hands get frozen in fear. They look straight ahead instead of through the turn, and they wind up going out of the exercise or straight ahead, because the bike goes wherever you look. Your hands will follow your eyes. This is not an opinion, and it works in everything. Skiing, roller skating, driving your car, even walking in the woods. People get walking in the woods and they get lost, and they find out that they've been walking in circles for hours. Is because, well, if you're right-handed, you tend to look to the right, and then you'll be making big right-hand circles. So learn this technique. It will save your life. If you've watched it, I'm going to show you a clip on the Dragon that actually this crash occurred right in front of my wife as she was riding the Dragon with some friends. Typical failure to negotiate a curve. The rider thought he was going too fast. Actually wasn't going too fast, but looked at the wrong place and went right off the curve. And it doesn't matter if you're 18 years old or 80 years old. If you don't know that technique, if you haven't put that in your mind that that's how it works, very likely could crash coming around a curve. I turn my head and eyes. I look through this curve. If I didn't do that and I looked straight, I guarantee you I'd either ride off the road or get really close to riding off the road. And if there's an oncoming vehicle and you look at that vehicle instead of where you want to go, chances are you're going to run right into that vehicle. This is especially helpful when you have S-shaped turns or decreasing radius turns. If you don't know where to look and when to look there, you are in deep trouble. To show you that age is not a factor, this rider is 75 years old, and what he doesn't have is technique. He cannot turn his head and eyes. If this was the street, he would have run off the curve right there. Again, he would have run off the curve. Think of these as S-shaped turns or switchbacks. If you don't know how to use your head and eyes, chances are you are going to run off the road. Here it doesn't matter because there's no cliff, there's no place to crash into except for the cones, and as you see, that's not a problem. Now this rider is 45 years old, but again, he has no technique, cannot turn his head and eyes. Right there, he would have run off the road if this was out on the street. He's heading for the gate between the two cones. Let's see if he makes it. He does. Now all he's got to do is go through the next set of cones. He looks straight, and the motorcycle goes straight right off the road, or the imaginary road in this case, thankfully. Inside cone to inside cone here is about 36 feet apart. That's more than enough room to make this turn if you use your head and eyes. He makes it through this gate, doesn't turn his head and eyes, so he doesn't get anywhere near that next gate to his right, and he just gives up. This is what the exercise should look like, and with this group of bikes you can clearly see the S-shaped turns or S-curves. Everyone here is using their head and eyes and looking only where they want the motorcycle to go. These riders would never run off a curve out on the street. They know the proper technique and they know how to use it. Before I go any further, I want to remind you to please subscribe. I hope you give me a thumbs up. And remember, if you don't like any of my YouTube videos, I give you a 100% money back guarantee. I'm right down the street from my home. Fortunately, we don't have any curves in Florida, but there's a set of curves right here, right down the street from my house, and almost every day somebody is running off these curves. It's amazing, both on motorcycles and in cars. Usually it's because they're going too fast for their skill level, but it's almost always has to do with not knowing where to look and when to look there. Not turning your head and eyes. If you look straight, you will go straight. I see that every Sunday in my class. People who refuse to turn their heads will ride right off the curve, which in that case is just out of the exercise. So please, if you learn nothing else, even if you want to be a duck walker for life and not learn how to use the friction zone and the rear brake, at least learn to use your head and eyes. Turn that head and eyes and look where you want to go. Your hands will follow your eyes every time. I hope you enjoyed this video, and maybe it could save your life sometime. Practice that head and eyes technique. The best way to do it is at low speeds under controlled conditions. In a parking lot, you don't want to discover, you have no clue how to use your head and eyes when rounding a bend at 60 miles an hour. Even here in Florida, where we have, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 winding roads in the entire state, people are still running off those 10 or 12 winding roads. Don't let that happen to you. It's very simple. Best way to do it is at low speeds. Practice the exercises I show you in my video because they force you to use your head and eyes along with the friction zone and proper use of the rear brake. And I've often, in fact, I recently got a comment. I was showing a young lady, little 110-pound girl, Marianne Hamilton doing a figure eight within 2 parking spaces wide by 2 parking spaces long. That's tight. That's 18 by 36. She's on a 950-pound Harley Davidson, and she has no problem doing it. And this idiot, you know, I have to say, the guy is an idiot. He commented, he said, "Oh, is that all you know how to do? Is turn the motorcycle at figure eights and circles in a parking lot?" Meanwhile, the last 7 minutes of the video was all out of one of our few winding roads here in Florida. So if he'd have just watched the video instead of sticking his 2 cents in when he hadn't even watched the video, he would know that, of course, I ride everywhere. But we learn the techniques under controlled conditions, not when rounding a turn at 50 or 60. Not when that car pulls out in front of you in a busy intersection at 50 miles an hour. That's not the place to learn how to transition your bike quickly from extreme left to extreme right. So I hope you enjoyed this. Until next time.